everybody, and welcome to the second Cyber Leaders Live. My name's Simon Linstead. I'm the founder of the InfoSec Live community and your host for the evening. The evening today is about meeting one of our industry's greatest leaders. The chap's name is Andy Jones, and without further ado, I'm going to bring him straight on because we've only got 30 minutes today to ask this man some questions. So, Andy, hello and welcome.
Hi, Simon.
Hi, please, Andy, please introduce yourself and tell all our viewers a little bit about you, please.
Okay, my name's Andy Jones. I've very recently retired from information security. So my career through information security has been a fairly long one. I started off with British Airways, actually, as a programmer. So I've got a technical background, stayed in programming for quite a while. But again, at British Airways, I moved probably just before the turn of the century, shows how old I am, into information security. And that was a great, so at the time, British Airways were particularly proactive in information security. So I had responsibility for antivirus strategy and helped with their awareness program. And that was a great introduction to that sort of environment. And I learned a lot at quite an early stage for information security. I then left British Airways after a total of about 16 years there, all told, and actually went to Sainsbury's to head up information security for Sainsbury's supermarket, which is
when was that, Andy?
That was just after about 2001, 2002.
Yeah.
That's a big UK supermarket. We also own some stuff in the States, but that was really good because that taught me really about supply chain. And I think one of the gifts of information security, you get to see such great companies and actually see how they work. I think that's one of the things that certainly excites me about the industry. So I headed up Sainsbury's for about 3 years and enjoyed my time very much there. But then I actually went and thought, well, I've done some of the practice of information security and cybersecurity, but what about the theory? So I then became a information security researcher for the Information Security Forum. At the time, that was operated by PwC, so that made me a PwC person. But I was solely assigned to the ISF, and the ISF, if you're not familiar with it, it has 400 big corporate members across the globe and does fundamental security research for them and does some other stuff. So I spent those years traveling the world, all the way down to Australia and back. We'd literally get on a plane and buy a round the world ticket, fly around the world. But what we do, we talk to professionals, security professionals in London and say, well, this one problem you've got, how have you approached it? And then we go to Germany, we go to South Africa, we go to India, and then we go to Australia and join all those dots together. So by the time we came back, we had a good solution, a holistic solution, and that's how it worked.
And just clarify, Andy, who got to benefit from that solution?
Well, what we do then is write it up and share it with the entire community. So 400 organizations get to a good solution that's practical and tested by other practitioners. So it's very much practitioners. So that was great. I did some great things. As you know, Simon, I have no legal background whatsoever. I've never done a legal course in my life, but I found myself as a member of the American Bar Association, and I actually consulted with Microsoft on American law.
Wow.
But you just get that opportunity. So that was a great opportunity. So I enjoyed my time there very much. But then I thought, well, I've done a bit of theory now. Can I take this theory and put it back in practice? And you'll see there's a pattern with my career. So I took my learnings and I went to Unilever to head up security for Unilever. So Unilever is a huge, big company, makes everything from Ben & Jerry's to Marmite and everything in between. Very, very global. And it's actually a very branded marketing company, very marketing. And that had different challenges. So at the time that I was there, Unilever were Facebook's second biggest customer in the globe.
Wow.
And we just consumed personal information. So one of the things I did then, I thought, well, should we not have a privacy function? So I actually created and set up a privacy function. But again, that was a great company to work for, very dynamic. And some of the things that I think is important to note, companies are messy. Now, Unilever, every 2 weeks, either opened a new factory or closed one. Well, there's no way in terms of assets, security assets, you can keep up to it. It's too dynamic for that. And they acquire companies and they dispose of them. And it's really, really messy. And that's the reality of working for a big multinational.
And how do you deal with that kind of turnover?
Well, you've got to be happy with it, but
Accepting.
you've got to get engaged in it. And one of the things I've got to engage in is mergers and acquisitions. You need to get in there. You need to know who we're likely to merge with.
Do you think that's becoming a bigger part of the M&A process now? The whole technology, the security side than it used to be.
Absolutely, because you inherit risk, and you need to be very careful about what you're taking on, because the M&As are quite a secret thing going on, because they obviously have big share implications. But you're not invited to the party, but you need to be knocking on the door. Say, it's important that I help and understand this at a very early stage. And because otherwise you're going to be stuck with risk. And, there are companies that have picked up risk through mergers and acquisitions. They just didn't want to. So it's important that we have that. So I see a comment come up against dissing Marmite, I think.
I know. I wasn't even going to address that, actually, Andy, because I'm a big lover of Marmite. So I'm going to ignore that and move straight on.
Yes. I could tell you a joke about Marmite, but we'll come back to that. We've only got
is that is that a watershed joke, or are we okay?
Let me tell you anyway. One of the things, and this is genuine. One of the great things about Unilever is there was a Facebook page for I love Marmite and one for I hate Marmite, and they had about 500,000 members each. But Unilever owned them both and managed them both, and it put out a advert once, and it was a picture of a cow pat. Right, the thing that a cow does and leaves on a field, and it said, "If a cow pat was full of B12 vitamins, would you eat it?" Love Marmite. And I just loved that they could really have a pop at their own product.
They've had a really good. Recently, they changed their marketing a bit, didn't they? I think 2 or 3 years back, and it made a huge spike increase in sales. They're very, very good at it. And do you know, I've actually learned today they're part of Unilever. I had no idea about.
Yeah, and you wouldn't believe the things that Ben and Jerry's, everyone thinks is made by some old guys in Vermont with some lovely cows. No, Unilever has owned that for about 16 years. It's a Unilever product. It's really good at branding. I learned a lot about branding from that company. So that was great. Then I wanted to move on because I do enjoy learning new industries. So then I actually went to Maersk Line, the big shipping company. Danish company, really interesting to get that perspective. Unilever was Anglo-Dutch, so you had a Dutch influence, but Maersk was definitely very Danish, very Viking. The Danes are Viking, never forget.
Progressive.
With big ships. That's what Maersk is. So again, that the link, I guess, was supply chain, because these were important. But looking at that and some of the things about that, and hopefully we'll pick up a little things about Maersk as we go through it. I mean, and I think that's one of the things I found out. And I know we're going to probably end up talking a little bit about pen testing, but for Maersk, one of the things that concerned me was we were actually internet enabling our ships at sea. Now, ships at sea used to be, you couldn't talk to them. There was a deep sea, there was no radio coverage. But with satellite communications improving, it became possible to actually real time link ships at sea, deep sea. So I started to think, well, what does that mean from security? Does that mean you can hack a ship because it's connected to the internet? So we thought, well, let's pen test a ship, right?
Well, I haven't heard of this before.
This is 500,000 metric tons. This is 30,000 containers on it.
Wow.
How do you pen test that? And it's harder than you think, because you don't want to pen test it when it's at sea, because that could be quite dangerous, because you don't know what's going to happen. And these things will kill people. They're dangerous things. And you can't do it at ports because they're really busy. They're unloading stuff. So we actually spent nearly 18 months trying to secure a ship to pen test. And eventually the guy responsible for the shipping phoned me up and said, "Andy, great news. I've got a ship that's actually at anchor. It's not doing anything. It's at anchor for the next 3 months that you can have for your pen testing." I said, "Oh, that's great. Where is it?" "Well, it's 200 miles off the Chinese coast." I thought, how am I going to get a pen test team there without killing them? Eventually, we did the pen test. And I think we were one of the very first companies to actually do that sort of testing, because we talked to other shipping companies and they were nowhere near doing that. And without sharing the details from it, it didn't give the pen testers much of a problem, shall we say. But that opened a whole new can of worms. And that's something that's a really underdeveloped area in pen testing. The industrial areas, we're digitizing organizations, we're digitizing factories. That means they're connected. They've got computers that are connected to the internet with a different approach to defenses. And there are paths back into you. So that's a very interesting area, I think.
The other part that you touched on with regards to the communication on the ships was satellites, Andy.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate enough to speak to a guy who's an expert on satellite communication, and he's absolutely horrified me with regards to the vulnerabilities in the GNSS system.
Yeah.
So again, that's another potential headache, I think, for us to come. Sorry, I'm digressing.
It's undeveloped, and shipping is an old industry, and I liken shipping to airlines because I'm familiar with airlines, and they're very similar to the extent that Maersk actually used to benchmark itself against Schiphol Airport, because they're so similar. And if you look at that, airlines have been on, but they digitized probably 20 years ago when I was there. And you think how they used to be, where we all used to have a paper ticket, a wax paper ticket, and now we do it on our mobile phones. That's taken a lot of doing, right? That didn't happen by accident. That is digitization, and shipping hasn't done it. So it's an old industry, and it's got some of the older things that are vulnerabilities that we still need to address. Now, they have woken up to it, and there's a lot of good work being done. But at the time, we were the first person to do that on the ship.
How long ago was that, Andy?
That was probably about 7 years, 5-6 years ago now, I think.
The answer is not very long, considering, isn't it?
Not very long, because then you have to do something about it. And the point about a ship is it's made in a shipyard in Taiwan. It might be leased. How do you address something? And it comes with a navigation system, but they're not all the same. Even though the same model of ship, they just put whatever was cheapest in. So there's variously consistent. And we talked to some of the manufacturers for the radars and said, well, have you done a security test? And they said, well, nobody's ever asked us that question before, so of course we haven't. And it's that industry.
Yeah.
And that
I think everyone's playing a desperate game of catch up at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah.
Let's stick with when you were at Maersk, because I think something quite exciting and terrifying happened whilst you were there, didn't it?
Well, certainly. So that was the NotPetya attack of 2017. I was the CISO for Maersk when that happened. That we could spend at least a couple of hours talking about. That was a very interesting episode to go through. And, I don't wish that sort of thing on anyone, but it having happened, you wouldn't have wanted to miss it. It's almost what you're trained for. It was a nation state attack, not on Maersk. It was actually on another country, and we got caught up in it. But it actually went from being a normal day with a Maersk is $50 billion company, with a company working normally, to actually having nothing. And when I mean nothing, I mean pen and paper were the most we had.
Wow.
We had no systems. We had no laptops. All the laptops are brick across the company. 2,500 systems down. 3,000 servers down. 50,000 laptops trashed. And that happened in 6 minutes. Now,
then what happened?
Then you and you think, you sit there and you think, well, is it just us, or is everybody in the world sitting in a crisis room thinking what just happened? And you don't.
That's the big nightmare, though, isn't it? That is what everyone's waiting for, Andy. I think.
But it wasn't just us. Some other big companies got caught. TNT, Maersk. There was Reckitt and Benkinson, and the Ukraine was taken down. And this, we are very positive about technology. Technology did not help us, mainly because this was a zero-day attack that was started by the US government. They created the vulnerabilities. It was Eternal Blue and Eternal Romance, created by the NSA, enhanced by the North Koreans, and further enhanced by the Russians.
So everyone
That's what you're
helps.
facing. That is what you are facing, and it was a traumatic event. That said, I believe Maersk responded quite well. They were very open in their communications, and let me tell you, it's a big IT incident. Yes, it's a big security incident. Yes, but it's also a big legal and a big communications
Absolutely.
exercise. And these are the things where I think, with a CISO hat on, people can mend technical stuff. I mean, I'm no longer technical, so I couldn't mend it. So the things that were important, to look at the other things that people weren't necessarily thinking about, talk to the regulators, because at that moment we'd probably breached every single regulation we could in 110 countries.
Yeah, in every country. Yeah.
Yes, and they all wanted to talk to us, by the way, at the same time. And all the police forces, and at the time, we knew the most about that attack because nobody else knew anything. So we had the most, so everyone wanted to talk to us. And you can't do that. So you've got to think, how am I going to...
But Andy, you were very open about what happened. Unfortunately, as we see in the press over the last year or two, lots of companies haven't been open about it at all. And they've only been open when it's come out 6 months later that they've had an attack through other means.
Yeah, and I think that's down to the culture of the company. And I would say the openness was reflective of Maersk. Maersk actually has a very distinct culture. It's Danish, and it has written cultural norms, which everybody is trained on. I know a lot of companies do that, but Maersk actually really believed them. And one was honesty and openness. And that was their natural go-to. And when you have nothing, you go back to those fundamental norms. Say, these guide us through this incident. And they were very, very focused on that. And I think that helped them, come out of it relatively well.
And you've hit the nail on the head with the word culture, haven't you? Because everyone I speak to in the security industry, the biggest problem is a lack of a security first culture mindset. And even with developers, it's the afterthought of security, isn't it? And that's what's got to change, I think.
Yeah. No, I mean, those things are and they're so difficult to do. I mean, I've run many awareness campaigns. Some have had success, some have not, but it's really, really hard to do. I mean, some I cringe when I think back to some of them. At Sainsbury's, I created an awareness company, and we had in the head office, we had 300 people, and I thought it'd be great if we did a quiz, and I create some security songs. So I just played them the songs and said, "What's the link to the security?" It was awful. But
it sounds engaging, at least, because I've seen some really dreary training videos. I think the old health and safety ones with John Cleese back in the 70s and 80s were some of the best ones I've seen, but they're a bit dated now.
I just went for it, particularly and again for Unilever. I decided that in order for people to understand classification of information, what we should do is, because we knew about detergents and things like that, we should actually make our classification look like washing labels. So dry clean only. That meant that was highly confidential. So I had this complete program of this. Luckily, brilliant. I decided that was a silly idea and didn't launch it, but I developed all the material.
Sounds like a good idea to me. So Andy, you've had leadership roles, you've had research roles, you've pretty much been in every leadership position in information security. What's the common theme that makes people a success in this industry, or isn't there one?
It's difficult, and some environments are difficult. So I've not worked in the finance sector, and that's probably a mystery, a bit of more of a mystery to me. I think it's being approachable, but above all pragmatic, because we'll learn the theory of information security, cybersecurity, and we can look at it and say, well, if you close every single vulnerability, you'll be safe. If you follow these rules, this ISO standard, NIST, whatever, you will be safe. In the real world of a messy multinational, that does not work. And you've got to be comfortable in that situation. You've got to be comfortable. There are things that you think, that's not great, but I haven't got the budget to do it. We shall have to either live with that or find some other way to approach it.
So then it's understanding and assessing the risk, isn't it? And knowing what risk can be acceptable, because as you rightly say, you're never going to negate and mitigate all the risks.
Yeah. It's all about risk. And I say, well, one of the characteristics of a good leader is having a nose for risk.
Yeah.
Is to be able to go somewhere and say, doesn't smell right. There's something wrong here. And yeah. And to articulate that risk, because you cannot close every hole. And we on your last show we talked about 1.7 million vulnerabilities. You're not going to close them all.
No.
You can't even process them all. You can't go through them to see if they are open. That's just too many. So you actually have to have that pragmatic outlook, which says, I will approach that. And my job is to take risk to the executive board, because they have to make huge decisions. And one of the real issues is with a big company like Maersk or even Unilever, where does cybersecurity sit on the big risk list, right?
Yeah.
And the risk of a cyber attack was on our risk list. It was actually pretty well accurately described, but it wasn't on the top 10, because for the risk for someone like Maersk was a tanker to go aground and spill oil. That would be billions and billions and billions. Yeah. That is the number one risk. Or the Chinese economy to have a turn down. That wipes out their profits. These are the risks. So you've got to compete with those risks. And when you put it in few financial terms, so the Maersk, not Petra attack, was actually costed by Maersk at $300 million US. Wow. When we evaluated, we actually put it in at 600, so we weren't too far off. But actually, that's a small risk for
cheaper than an oil spill.
Yeah, for a $50 billion company, that's a small risk. So it's getting that attention. That's the hard bit.
Again, it's. I was having this conversation with Thomas McKenzie, who was the chap on the show last week, and I've got 20 years financial services background, so I had 20 years assessing and I suppose explaining risk to people. And I think there's a gap in this market for having some risk models for industries. And you've made me think that even more after the discussions we've had today, because a lot of industries, especially financial services, with the DORA regulations coming out in Europe soon, it's going to be like GDPR for those guys all over again. And I implemented GDPR with my own financial services company, and I'm sure it wasn't different for many others, that it was a very last minute, make sure everything was done and get the boxes ticked in time event. And I hate to say it, I see the same thing coming with this.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. And one thing I found out, it wasn't Maersk, probably Unilever, is information security is actually relatively mature at risk compared to some other bits, because you have to engage with other risk functions. So each big company will have about 9 different risk functions. There'll be treasury risk, there'll be brand risk, market risk, all those type of risks, and you need to engage them. And I recall a meeting I had with all the heads of the risk functions, and I said, before we start this meeting, can we just agree what our definition of risk is? Evidently, we couldn't.
No. It's hard enough as a financial planner getting a husband and wife to agree on risk, never mind a board.
Yeah, and some of them were sounded that we actually had some methodologies for dealing with risk. They didn't. So, and I think one of the things in information security, you can be a bit negative on yourself and say, well, everyone's a bit better than us. We're not mature at risk. We're just, tinkling with risk, which is probably quite true to the test. But compared to others, you might be doing a pretty good job.
Yeah. So, Andy, I'm conscious we've got only about 6 or 7 minutes. I mean, we can go over a couple of minutes left, but there were a couple of things you were quite interested in talking about today. Do you want to remind me what the most important one was, so I don't give you the wrong one at this moment?
Yeah. So I think we probably touched Internet of Things. I think that's a big area.
I think we touched on it. I know that we've got 2 people in the audience, Aaron being one, who's quite heavily interested in that, I believe. So if you've got any other insights on that, I'm sure people would be welcome to hear them.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've talked about the big factory internet, but I think where you've got the Internet of Things, and I'm including industrial Internet things, which is your factories, but also your day-to-day devices, the stuff that's coming into the office that you're not necessarily aware of as a security professional, because it's not part of the IT, because someone's put in a coffee machine that happens to be an Internet of Things device. So it's connected to the network separately. Now, these are weak points in your network. And I think the big point about it, you won't have seen this because nobody thought it was an IT project, so no one told you.
No.
It's the same with factories. A factory upgraded might upgrade the factory and connect it. And, that just happened. So you didn't find out about it. So I think it's actually having the vigilance and, maybe scanning your network for these sort of devices, because they do have characteristics you can spot on a snort or something like that.
It's having that complete asset register, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, to have let me tell you, the only time where you have a perfect asset register, where you have perfect awareness of information security, is when something like NotPetya has just finished. At that stage, you know everything. You know all your systems. Because honestly, big corporate will have systems that nobody knew what they did.
Yeah.
And we said, shall we bring this back? Has anybody asked for it? No. Well, let's not bring it back.
I can't mention the company I used to work for a number of years, but they're a fairly large UK-based life insurance provider, and they were very good at going around buying up other investment houses and life insurance providers. And when I worked there, they had about 27 legacy systems all cobbled together, and I just wonder what that mess looks like now.
And notwithstanding, of course, that many big corporates still run on legacy, and legacy is a funny word, because any other context, legacy is a good thing. This person left a great legacy, a football legacy, that's a great thing, except when you refer to IT, it's bad. But these are the things that make things work, and we have this layer on top, which is our internet flashy lights thing, that is still reliant on something that might well be COBOL still running. And that's true for a number of organizations, and we shouldn't, and it's really difficult to get control of, but these are the hearts. I prefer the word heritage. The heritage of the company.
I think that's actually what the life insurance company I used to work for used to call them, Andy, as well. Heritage systems.
Yes. But they're really important, and they keep stuff going, but they're still going. And computing is a bit like that. We rush into the flashiness, not forgetting the things that are actually turning the cogs are perhaps the older stuff, and that's the stuff we sometimes neglect.
Absolutely. Andy, let's finish off on the importance of people within an organization. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, people. I mean, the Maersk recovery was actually a people-led recovery, and there are a couple of things there. One, the ships continued to sail even though they didn't have the systems backing them up, and they did that because we had experienced captains who knew how to get into port without the proper paperwork, or could process manual paperwork, because they really knew the organization. And we had people that did innovative things. And as a CISO, your risk appetite changes during this incident. You have to be comfortable with doing things that would never be acceptable on a normal day, because it's not a normal day. Because generally people can't make things any worse, so you let them do what they like, within reason. But they're innovative because they know the company well. Now, as we digitize, and more companies digitize, we lose perhaps some of that deep knowledge of how our companies work. But certainly for the Maersk recovery, it was people-led, because we only had people. We didn't have technology. We just had no technology. So people were the things that could bring it back. And I've talked to a number of organizations that had similar experiences to Maersk. Maersk wasn't unique. And, they said the things that made a difference are the people. And that's why it's so important that people are key to everything.
Absolutely. Actually, I've got one more question that I've just thought of while you were saying that. There's a massive influx of small businesses now becoming aware of the need to embrace cybersecurity. And if I look back at my firm, I had a few years back, 30 staff, say, maybe a couple of million turnover. You probably have 50, 60, 70 assets, maybe. So not massive, but still, your IT is normally outsourced to one kind of managed service provider. A lot of people I've spoken to recently who are in that position now, who now go into their service providers and saying, what do we need to be doing for cybersecurity, are either being met by blank looks or an off-the-shelf solution that they can plug in to solve all their problems. From someone like yourself who's got the experience in the industry, if you were one of those business owners who's got a legacy business and they know they've now got to start embracing security, where do you go first?
Yeah, I mean, there's all the things like, the virtual CISO, you can buy this as a service and all that sort of good thing. One of the things that's come up fairly recently is the role of cyber insurance. And I would actually say, apply for cyber insurance and go through the process, because if you apply for cyber insurance, there's a very prescriptive process that the insurance company will make you go through.
Yeah.
And that will reveal a number of different. Now they'll very happily sell you some services to plug those gaps, but there's a discipline of going through it. And because it's quite hard with a startup or whatever to put money into cybersecurity, it's not seen as revenue generating, but insurance is something that is certainly at the board level is well understood. So use that avenue, go down cyber insurance, go through the process, because that will reveal where you have weaknesses. So
do you know what? It's so blindingly obvious now you've said that, but you're the only person who's ever said that as an answer to me on that question, and it just makes absolute sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You might get a big raft of really annoyed insurance providers now sending messages in saying that people who just do quotes and don't transact business will be banned. But we'll see.
But the insurance industry is one of the things they're doing well is actually selling awareness campaigns to particularly smaller businesses, because they can't have an awareness campaign. So as part of your cyber insurance, you'll buy into that and get an awareness, and you'll get a discount for it. Yeah. It's actually quite an interesting model.
Okay, Andy, before we go, we've run over a little bit. Anything you'd like to say before we close off for the evening?
I mean, the only thing I would like to say that cybersecurity, information security is a great discipline, and you are applying that to a multinational that is a messy beast. And some of the things that we think are true are not true when you apply it to that messy beef. Technology isn't the solution to everything. You can't close every vulnerability. You can't expect people to do things that you expect them to do all the time. So just understand that you're taking what is often a prescriptive, there are lots of standards, not millions, but there are thousands of standards, and applying it to a messy organization will not necessarily cure the problem. You just need to understand that that's how big organizations are.
Andy, I could speak to you probably for another 5 or 6 hours. I'd love to have you on again if you've got the time. I think it would be fantastic, and I think our guests would agree with that. Everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to watch. The only plug I'll give is there's a link to join our free community at the bottom. Andy, you've been my most interesting guest by a mile. Thank you so much for your time, sir. We'll definitely have you back on again. Yeah. I'll play you all out with a little cheeky video about the community with some reviews from our community members, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you very much.
It's been so great to be part of this awesome community where you can learn, get potential jobs, and this is the part that the community has helped me the most, being able to get a great contract in security, and thanks for this.
You don't have to be super experienced in order to contribute. They really foster a sense of community, and they encourage everybody to contribute anything that they can, regardless of whether you're just starting out in your career or if you've been in the career for decades. I like the different challenges that they have, the different pathways that you can follow, the fact that you can join communities that are specific to you and your needs. It's a new and growing and thriving group, and I'm really proud that I was able to be a part of it from almost the very beginning.
It's given me a community I could lean on, and the people in there are always willing to help. I've also gotten to break into cybersecurity because of InfoSec Live, and I'm very grateful for that.
Cybersecurity professional or trying to become one, you need to get onto InfoSec Live.
Whether are you brand new to the field, whether you are pivoting from another IT career or you're pivoting from a non-IT career, this is the place for you to. Also, even if you are an experienced professional, there will be something here that you can learn.
InfoSec Live has been great for me because it's brought me closer to other like-minded people, and I've been able to pick the brains of some real industry experts that are also part of the community.
To the right place, because listen, let me tell you that infosec.live is everything that it claims to be. A vibrant community. They've got all that you need on infosec.live. Listen, to tell you, infosec.live is addictive. Get on board. Come and get addicted.
Get on InfoSec now.